Hello from your favorite Nepo baby. You always tell me that I'm so down to earth for a person who has a trust fund. And the thing is, I would love to tell you that I've always been this way, but that would be such a lie. The reason why I'm more or less aware of my privilege today is because there were circumstances in my life where I understood that we lost everything. In 2014, when the war has started in the east of Ukraine, absolutely everything has changed for my family. From thinking that I would never have to worry about money in my life and that my dad has built an empire for my grandkids, all of a sudden, we had to restart everything. So today, I want to tell you a story, how my family went from having a business which was generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue to my dad having to start over at the age of 50. So all of this started when I was born in the small city of the east of Ukraine. It was called Alchevsk. There was absolutely nothing there but one factory. I was the youngest of 3 siblings, so when I was born, my parents were already doing financially really well. Because of that, we moved to a bigger city called Luhansk. You have probably heard of it. When we moved to Luhansk, we moved to this absolutely huge mansion. We had a huge pool, we had a lot of dogs, it was like a garden there. It was a dream come true. But the thing is, I thought that everybody was living exactly the same life, so I didn't even know that my life is some type of special. The reason why I started understanding that I'm more or less privileged is because when I was 5, my parents had to get bodyguards. My middle sister is 3 years older than me, so when she was in school, one time she almost got kidnapped. And ever since I was 5, I had bodyguards. To be honest, when you say bodyguards, everybody thinks that it's something really cool, but the reality, they were my best friends, and they were more like nannies. We were playing Totally Spies and all of the other games, and I thought that I have the coolest friends on earth. Another time when I started realizing that I'm privileged is when I was driving from home to school. As I was driving, I understood that we're getting gas at my dad's gas stations, we're going to our grocery stores. In front of my school there is a mall which was built by my dad, and my friends all of a sudden started telling me that I'm doing pretty well. And to be honest, it made me feel prideful. I felt really cool. And one time, when I was misbehaving, I actually was rude to one of my bodyguards. I will never forget how my mom told me that I'm such a spoiled brat, and the reason why I have everything today is not because I have accomplished something, but because my dad is extremely hardworking. As I was growing up, it was very confusing how to treat my privilege, but I was getting used to it, and then my middle sister went to boarding school in England, and my older sister was already in Kiev, so I stayed all by myself. That was the time when I started feeling pretty lonely and pretty depressed, but luckily because I was a professional athlete, I got invited to be a part of the national team, and my mom and I had an opportunity to move to Kiev. My dad wanted to go with us, but because he's a businessman, he didn't want to leave and go nowhere. He wanted to make sure that first he will build a huge business in Kiev as well, and only then he will move. But reality was very different. My mom and I moved in 2013. My dad was coming every weekend, and I loved being in Kiev. For the first time, I was a small town girl, and I was going to this international school, and all of my friends were now people who were studying from all over the world. They were the kids of the embassy children, they were the kids of the biggest businessmen in Kiev, and I felt so cool. Moreover, for the first time in my life, I have convinced my dad not to have bodyguards. Because even though it sounds very cool having them, the reality was very different. Every time I would go to the cinema, they would sit in 2 rows behind me, and I tried to hide them, and I was begging them not to come with me, but all of my friends knew who they are, and to be honest, it made me uncool. But in Kiev, I had full freedom. I no longer had bodyguards, and that was such a freeing feeling. So my mom would ask me to go to Luhansk every other weekend, but I was like, no, all of my friends are in Kiev, I don't want to go. If back then I knew that I wouldn't have an opportunity to go back home, I would never miss that chance. So when my dad was visiting us, we were always talking how he will move. But then the war has started. First it was revolution. When the revolution has started, my dad told me to go to Luhansk, and so me and my sisters, my nephew who was less than 1 year old, we went to Luhansk. The revolution was happening in Kiev, and we thought that nothing is going to happen at the border. But what has actually happened is, I remember we were sitting in the living room and watching the TV, and we heard that the invasion is going to be happening. So I was sitting in my house, and I was understanding that we're about to get invaded. It was fucking scary, I'm not gonna lie. I remember how my parents were putting water in our baths, and I was asking mom why she put in the water there, and she said, if something is gonna come into our house and there's gonna be fire, at least we have water. I remember how my parents told me, go to sleep, and they couldn't, because every time I heard some noise, I thought that we were already invaded. Nothing happened that night, so my family and I were able to leave. My dad had to stay, because my dad was employing thousands of people, and he had the responsibility for them. So first he had to make sure that all of them have an opportunity to leave the city, and only then he would come. When I came to Kiev, it seemed like nothing was happening. Everything was very calm. I kept on going to school. My friends were doing well. So I thought, maybe it's over. 2 weeks later, my dad was able to come to Kiev as well. I still remember how he came with just one hand luggage. All he had there was one pair of jeans, a couple of t-shirts, and socks. Because all of us were convinced that the war is not going to last more than 2 weeks. Spoiler alert, I haven't been home for more than 10 years now. So as I was going to school, everything was fine. But then I was coming home and I was listening to my parents talking in the kitchen. And I thought, they're being so dramatic. Nothing bad is really happening. I was 16 and I didn't really realize what is war, what has changed in our family. I thought that we're fine. Come on, we've always been fine. Nothing could ever change in my life. We're so fucking privileged. Like, what could go wrong? But what I didn't realize is that half of my dad's business was now bombed. The other half was just no longer working. There was a war. And when my parents were worried, I was like, guys, stop overreacting. What a great advice. For the first time in my life, I saw my parents depressed. And just so you understand, my parents were always heroes in my eyes. I always thought that those are the people with whom nothing bad could ever happen. My dad is a very healthy man. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't do any of the bad stuff. But he had to cope with the stress somehow. So what he was doing is, before I was going to school, he would come back from running. My dad would always run around 10 kilometers every morning. But when I was going to school and I saw him before that, I was asking him, Dad, what's wrong with you? Why are you so red? And he was telling me, I think I ran around 20 kilometers. And I was like, why? And he told me, I needed to get away from my thoughts. And I thought, my parents are depressed. What can I do? And I couldn't do anything because I was 16 or 17. To be honest, I didn't have any experience or any skills. I couldn't help them financially. The only thing I could come up with is just telling them jokes and drama about my school. So when I would come back from school, I would always tell my dad and my mom, oh, that there was this gossip and that there was another gossip. And at the times when I made them laugh, I felt like I succeeded. So 2 years went by. It was absolutely uncertain, and my sisters were far away from me, and I had nobody to tell it to. And I didn't want to tell it to my parents because they were also depressed, but I didn't know if I would be able to go to college now. Before, it was never even a question if I'm gonna go to college or not, because it was an obvious path. Both of my sisters did it, and I was better at school, so I was like, of course I'm gonna go into a great college. But then I thought that we can't fucking afford it. There is no money, like there is nothing. And the colleges where I wanna go are around $70,000 a year. So one day, my dad came to me and he asked me, so how are the college applications going? And I asked him, should I still apply? Can we afford that? And he told me, Albina, I will make sure that I will sell anything if I have to, but you will go to college. I didn't have this opportunity and I don't want you to miss out because of some up. So I started applying, and one night I got an email from Syracuse University. It was late at night and I read, congratulations, you got accepted. And my first reaction was, I have to run to my parents and tell them that I got accepted, because this is so fucking exciting. But I didn't want to do this because I thought, if I go and tell them this right now, are they going to lose sleep? Is my dad not going to be able to fall asleep because he's going to be thinking, where is he going to be looking for money? But then I thought that I want to treat my parents the same as before the war. So I actually did come out to them and I told them that I got accepted, and they were so happy for me. But then I told them that I also got accepted not for journalism, but for computer science. And my dad told me, oh my God, we have to start looking for tutors for you. And I was like, yes, please, let's do that. Some time passed by, and I actually went to Syracuse University. And for the first year, it was very difficult. Before the war, I would never worry about my grades. I would want to get good grades all of the time, but I never cared about actually understanding the material. Now that I understood how expensive that shit is, I actually wanted to be good at it because I didn't want my parents to just waste this money. On top of that, for the first time in my life, I considered that I actually have to get a job. And I was able to do that. My first job, it was in the International Center, and I was getting $12 an hour. And I was like, oh my God, I have my own money? This is so amazing. 2 years later, I was able to get a job in IT department, and now I was making $17 an hour. Oh my God, am I an oligarch? That's so much. I remember that one time I even sent $100 to my parents. Come on, they were sending me $3,000 every month, but I thought that an act of it would inspire them. And my dad still talks about it till this day. He was like, Albina, I remember how you sent money to us. That was so kind of you. And I thought, this is so pathetic that people at my age are literally supporting their entire families. And I just sent hundreds of dollars and my parents are acting so grateful. The only thing I could actually do in order to financially help them is to graduate early. So I was always taking the maximum amount of credits every semester, and that's why I was able to graduate 1 semester early. It actually saved a lot of money for my parents, and my dad still thanks me for this. As I was going through college, my dad started a completely new business. Prior to the war in 2014, he was in gas and oil, and he was also in construction. After 2014, he decided that the biggest opportunities are going to be in agriculture. So my dad was able to get back on his feet within 4 years. Within 4 years, he rebuilt everything. And the reason why he was able to do this is because our family was so united. We never let each other down. We always supported each other. And I saw how many people never recovered from the depression. I saw how many people gave up. And I was looking at my parents and I understood that those people take inspiration from one another. I know if we weren't that united throughout this entire time, we would never be able to recover. For 2 years, we were more or less in peace, even though, keep in mind, ever since 2014, the war has never stopped, but at least we were able to recover. But then, in 2022, I read on Twitter that there could be a possible invasion. And I'm thinking, absolutely no fucking way. It can't be happening again. And then I see that it is. And my first thoughts were, now it's not just the east of Ukraine. I just couldn't imagine that we all have to go through this again. But the good thing, I was already an adult. I was already working in corporate America. I was making pretty good money. And I was thinking, at least now, I can be more valuable for my family. The thing I want to tell you, this world is so crazy. It's so uncertain. The biggest illusion which you have is to think that you have some certainty in life. But the reality is very different. If you're a rich kid and you're thinking that you will never have to worry about anything, I encourage you to think twice. Please, make sure that you always create a safety net. Make sure that you have savings. Make sure that you support one another. There are no certainties, but what is certain is that if you provide the love and support to your family, it will always pay off. Thank you for listening to this story, and as always, do whatever you want with this information.